So first off, thank you very much for everybody for being here, and we appreciate your time. I hope lockdown is treating everybody well. We're all good and surviving and getting on with it and baking banana bread and carrot muffins, carrot cake and banana bread, that everybody's good. And the horses are all fine. I'm glad that Neigh-Bours can help us out a little bit with, has been able to get some good information out there. I hope it's been helpful for everybody. And please let me know if there are other people that you need, that you'd like to chat to, or there are other subjects that you would like covered, and we will happily organize it for you if that's what you want. So guys, just to introduce you to Kerri. Kerri, give us a wave. Hi, Kerri.
Hi.
Kerri is a labor law consultant, and what I've asked her to do here tonight is just to chat to everybody about, to give a concise and definitive answer to the question of what do we need as a business, whether you're a yard or a restaurant, or it doesn't really matter what it is, but for any business, especially yards, because Kerri is a show jumper and a rider. She can sort of, she's part of the community and can give us that answer. So what we're looking for is a really concise answer to what do we need as businesses, as physical businesses, to be able to prepare to open during lockdown. So I'm going to pass over to Kerri and let her just tell her a little bit about her background and give us some answers to that. Thanks, Kerri, go for it.
Okay, perfect. Thank you, Meryl. I'd just like to say again, thanks to Neigh-Bours and thanks to Meryl for organizing this Q&A session. I honestly, Francois' session, and I think you guys have done a really, really good job of getting information out and getting people onto this platform to just speak to people about something that's a bit unprecedented and everyone's a bit unsure of everything at the moment. So I think it's really,
not like it's ever happened to any of us before.
Exactly. So just a quick, basically heads up. I'm not here to discuss whether yards can or can't open up. I'm purely here to give information about what businesses would need as a yard or as any other company in order to open up during level 4, and as well as anything after. So this isn't just for level 4, it's for level 4, level 3, level 2, level 1, any levels from 4 and onwards. This is also something that is completely unprecedented, not only in South Africa, but in the rest of the world. So it is something that we are all trying to figure out basically by trial and error. And we have had a few guidelines and a few regulations given and kind of had to interpret things from there. So based on the Disaster Management Act and the regulations for alert level 4, all industries or businesses, when wanting to open, would need to have certain measures in place. Things like your compliance officer, who would have to oversee a plan for phased in return of employees and make sure that the company is adhering to hygiene protocols. So when you develop your plan for a phased in return of employees, you would basically look at who would be able to work during that phase in, what is the plan for phasing in employees, what are the health protocols that are in place, and then the details of your COVID officer or your compliance officer, as well as the measures to ensure that the standard of health protocols are met. For example, your social distancing. For stable yards, there wouldn't necessarily need to be a phased in approach depending on how big your yards are and depending on how many people you have working for you. Yards are actually a great business to use as an example because most of your work area is outside, is outdoors. And most of the time, the jobs that you are actually fulfilling or your duties that you are fulfilling whilst at a stable yard, you're maintaining social distancing naturally without having to try too much. So it is quite an easy company to bring into compliance. And then under Annexure E, essential services, stables would then be looked at possibly under Section B11, which will then refer to animal care. So on the 17th of March 2020, the Department of Labour and Employment sent out a letter which basically said that you should be looking at the Occupational Health and Safety Act with the hazardous biological agents regulations in order to govern your workplace and get your workplace ready for compliance due to the COVID-19 pandemic. You would look at providing and maintaining as much as possible a safe working environment for your employees, and that's when you would obviously look at your risk assessments. The Department of Labor COVID guideline speaks about 4 specific points. Firstly, your engineering controls, which isn't necessarily specific to yards, but would more be for factories. So that's your ventilation, to make sure that you have air filters, and then face shields. The second point is administrative controls. Those are things like working from home, using virtual meetings instead of face-to-face meetings, having a rotation of your staff or having shift work, and then making sure that your employees are not only trained on what COVID-19 is and how to stop the spread of it, but also how to use their PPE and how to maintain their PPE. The third point would be safe work practices, basically procedures for safety of employees from the actual risk itself. Things like your no-touch bins, your 70% alcohol disinfectants, your surface disinfectants, etc. And then the last point would be PPE, which is your actual face masks and your shields and your sanitizers and your gloves, etc. So when we speak about a risk assessment, your actual risk assessment starts off by identifying your exposure levels. This can be broken down into 4 categories. So very high and high, then medium, and then low. So very high and high would not apply at all to stable yards. This applies mostly amongst healthcare workers, basically people who are working in hospitals, working in morgues, actually coming into contact with COVID-19 patients. Your medium exposure jobs would be people who have contact with the general public. So that I would look at for a yard specifically, more your collections and your deliveries, not necessarily your clients coming in and out. Your clients coming in and out aren't doing face-to-face contact with your grooms. They can just go straight to their horses and go straight out. And then your low exposure risk, which is most of the tasks or duties which are fulfilled at a stable yard. Basically, you need to determine the control measures that need to be implemented to minimize the exposure. You then need to look at your identification of high contact activities. So anything that is high contact, you need to minimize face-to-face contact and ensure minimal contact between workers as far as possible. And then this point specifically refers to, or would be referring to, stable yards, is to limit your customers or your public's access to the workplace, or to restrict access to certain areas. So, for example, if you have an office or a clubhouse at your yard, there would be no reason for your clients to enter those premises. So try and keep it to, you go to the parking lot, you park your car, you go to your horse, you tack your horse up, you get on your horse, you ride, you get off your horse, you untack, and then you leave. The third would be identification of vulnerable workers. And this is obviously where you'll speak about it constantly throughout your risk assessments. Vulnerable workers are generally people who are above the age of 60 years old, or people who have underlying conditions. It's more advisable to get them to stay at home. Obviously, grooms can't work from home, but it's highly advised to keep them at home. If you're able to pay them from home, that would be the best option. Or, for example, keep them in a certain area, maybe only working in the paddocks where they're not coming into contact with other workers or other people. You need to also have in place a symptom screening as part of your risk assessment, and provide steps to take if an employee presents the COVID symptoms. You need to ensure that every employee has a minimum of 2 cloth masks. You need to provide hand sanitizers. You need to disinfect work surfaces and equipment. Ensure there is adequate facilities for washing your hands with soap and clean water, and making use of only paper towels, no cloth towels at all, and make sure that workers are required to wash and sanitize their hands regularly. Should you return to the workplace, or should you reopen your company during level 4 and anything lower, and not have a proper risk assessment and implementation of necessary protection measures, you will definitely risk fines or imprisonment if an employee is exposed to COVID whilst at work. That's basically a summary of everything you would need in order to return to the workplace again during level 4 and afterwards.
Thanks, Kerri. That's great. That's a really good, that gives us a really good basis to work from.
Sure.
Guys, just a reminder that if you want to ask a question, if I could ask you please to use the Zoom hands up function, and then just drop your question in chat. If you're not sure how to get to the chat button, have a look at the bottom of your screen. You should, if you mouse over, you'll see a whole lot of icons, and you will be able to see the chat function. Just pop your question in there. I have a question for you, Kerri.
Mm-hmm.
Where would, okay, so we're going to have a file, and we're going to need a person to do all this for us, or a
compliance officer.
Yeah, a compliance officer. I'm assuming, now I run events, I'm assuming that that is very similar to a safety officer for my events.
So if you have a safety officer, I would advise keep that the same person.
Okay.
It's someone who already knows how to handle risks and how to make sure that the work environment is a safe work environment. Where we look at a stable yard specifically, my suggestion would be either the owner or the yard manager.
Okay, so if I don't specifically have a safety officer, I can appoint a person.
100%.
The owner, yard manager, I can say, right, it's you, and they don't need to have any specific degrees or qualifications or anything like that. You can just say, you have been appointed the safety officer, and this is now your problem.
Yes.
That's great. Okay. But yards that have graded shows, things like that, and that are getting JOC certification for those shows would have a safety officer. So straight away, that's their go-to person.
That would be my suggestion. It doesn't have to be that person. My suggestion would be use someone who has the knowledge around already safety risks and safety and health risks in a workplace. It makes life a lot easier with someone who already has that background knowledge. It does not have to be your safety officer, though. Okay,
all right, that makes sense. All right, so obviously there's going to be a whole bunch of forms that we need to fill out, that we need to have displayed or in a file in the office at easy. Where do we get these forms? Where would we get them?
My company itself offers 2 separate, if I can call them, packages to our clients, as well as I've opened it up to all stable yards. I'm sure a lot of people have seen my posts on Facebook. To either on one side just conduct the risk assessment. Some yards already have certain measures in place and have already fulfilled the requirements that are needed and just need a risk assessment done. Then we offer to either come to the yard in person and look around the yard and sit with the yard owner and go through all the information that I would need in order to conduct the risk assessment. And once the risk assessment is finished, I sign it, the yard owner signs it, or the compliance officer, whoever that is, and that would then stay in a file. That would cost you, for my company CTL to do for you, that would cost you 2,800 Rand as a total package. The other package that we offer, if you actually just give me a second, I want to bring up the specifics. So the other package that we offer actually has a total of 8 different parts to it. So we have a COVID-19 policy, which will be implemented straight into your workplace. We have a document discussing safe work practices. So obviously that's what I was discussing earlier, with your procedures for safety from risk, your no-touch bins, your alcohol, disinfectants, etc. Then a self-audit checklist. So once this is all complete, you would then go through the checklist and say, yes, I have a COVID-19 policy. Yes, my employees are aware of such. Yes, we have a risk assessment. Yes, we have a compliance officer, just to make sure that you have all your ducks in your row, basically. It then also includes the actual risk assessment itself. We also have the visitor information form. So this would be signed by any person who is not an employee of the company. Every single time they come onto your premises, they need to sign in a visitor information form. So these are your forms that you might be signing if you go to a doctor's offices or anything else at the moment, where you fill out, have you been in contact with someone who has been tested positive for corona? Have you experienced any of these symptoms? Has anyone in your family experienced these symptoms? And have you traveled outside of the company in the last 14 days? So that's the visitor information form. The employee information form is very similar. However, it also speaks about what would need to happen should the employee say yes to anything. Then we also have a slideshow presentation, which can either be, or it can either be a slideshow presentation sent to you or just document form of an induction or awareness training for your actual employees. So it speaks about what is COVID, how is COVID spread, how do I wear a mask, how do I keep myself safe, what is social distancing, what is quarantine. It basically is a full explanation for your employees to have all information before starting to open up your business.
Kerri, sorry, can I stop you there?
Sure.
That presentation, would that be suitable for grooms?
100%.
Okay.
It is completely across the board. We have not made it too complicated. It's very basic English. It's very easy to understand as well. So it does not take an educated person to understand it. It's great. Very simply put. Yes, it's very straightforward.
Yeah, that's what I was asking.
100%.
Sorry to interrupt you.
No worries. We also have your procedure for medical screening, which is basically a form to complete should one of your employees present with COVID-19 symptoms. So what was their temperature? What date were they sent home? And then it basically says that they are allowed to return to work after X many days without symptoms. And they must obviously go into isolation. Then, as I spoke about earlier, your employee information form. We also have your procedure to deal with suspected cases in the workplace. So they would have to go into an isolation area. You would then have to phone the COVID hotline and basically go on from there. And then if anyone is actually related to COIDA, if anyone's actually supplementing or paying towards COIDA, it's in your COIDA reporting structure. So how do you lay a claim?
What's COIDA?
Your compensational and occupational injuries. So basically injury on duty. Yes. So that would be your reporting structure. That would obviously only apply if you guys are related to COIDA. So if COIDA is something that you pay towards every month and all your employees are or contribute to that, if you pay contributions to COIDA, then it would be your reporting structure for that. And then we also have a whole bunch of A4 posters, which would also come with that package, that you can then print out and put up everywhere, all common areas, your bathrooms, your offices, and have them displayed in your workplace.
Okay, that's
and
great.
That package altogether costs 6,500 Rand.
But, okay, so I am not a yard owner, right?
Okay.
And my business is online, so I'm kind of trying to extrapolate here. And right now the reality is that money's tight.
Yes.
Money's insanely tight. Is it possible that we can get away with the risk assessment, but the rest of the stuff we can do ourselves?
100%.
Is that a possibility? I know it's not ideal, but and I understand that best result is to just do the whole package and off you go. But for some yards, the reality is that's not an option.
So
yeah, so your absolute must-have, can't get away without, is you have to have a risk assessment from a company that is able to do a risk assessment successfully.
100%.
What makes you able to do that? What is the qualifications that I'm looking for in that company?
So it's not necessarily qualifications. It's from our side, we are a labor law consulting company. We have dealt with the labor law. I mean, the company's been open for 30 years. I have 2.5 years experience in the labor law industry itself. So we have dealings with legal aspects and statutory changes on a daily basis. So it's not that you necessarily have to be qualified to do it, but we have the background knowledge of how the labor law works, how the Department of Labor works, and inspections. For example, I run employment equity for a lot of my clients. A lot of clients have Department of Labor inspections for employment equity or for their contracts. So we are fully aware of what the Department of Labor requires, even though this is unprecedented, and how the format would need to follow in order to be compliant.
Okay, yeah, that makes perfect sense. Okay.
Yeah.
That's
My
very
suggestion is if yards or if businesses are not able to afford the full package, that's completely understandable. The risk assessment is it is a must, and I would highly suggest getting someone who is knowledgeable in the field to conduct it for you. Regarding the rest of the package, it's certain things that you can do on your own. They are just very time consuming, and we have everything structured based on what we've been doing our research on, what other companies have had as well. So we really have picked from everywhere that we can in order to create this package.
Okay, Kerri, so what I'm going to do is after this, I'm going to, when we post the recording, if it's okay with you, I'm going to give your contact details so people can contact you.
Perfect.
To get hold of you and discuss that a little bit more, if they need those packages. I had quite a nice suggestion come up on WhatsApp. I'm getting people WhatsApping me questions, but I've had quite a nice suggestion. You know, they say, you know, your yard is as much as it's a business, it's also a little micro community.
Yes.
And at 2/8, you need 28 people to each throw in 100 rands.
Yeah.
Which sounds a lot. You know, I understand there's some yards that aren't 28 people, but yes, most yards would be able to find 28 people attached to them and chuck in 100 rand, and there's your risk assessment covered. So I thought that was quite a nice idea.
And the 2/8 is not 2/8 excluding that, it's 2/8 in total. Your invoice will be 2,800 rand. Yes.
Oh, that's brilliant. Okay. So I've had another question come up from WhatsApp that says, please keep them anonymous, which is fine. What happens if they don't pass the risk assessment? I think, and this is a fear that people have, and I don't want people thinking, oh, I mustn't get the risk assessment because I'm not going to pass. It's a bit like, what if I have a horse that doesn't fail the vet, that doesn't pass the vetting? I think it's that kind of question. So yeah, what happens if they don't? Is a risk assessment a pass or fail thing?
No.
And then what happens?
So the risk assessment, how it's basically set up is exactly that. You're assessing the risk that you could have. So I would structure your risk assessment based on departments. Obviously, at a stable yard, you don't necessarily have different departments like you would in a business. Like you would in a company, a normal office company. I would look at your office, your actual stables, as in the groom's duties, any deliveries or collections, and then possibly your bathroom area or your kitchen area. It obviously depends yard to yard. I would then assess the risks. So currently you have XYZ measures in place to mitigate the effects or the adverse effects of COVID on your employees or from visitors coming in and affecting your employees. These are the risks that I see that you haven't dealt with yet. These are the measures that need to be implemented. Does that make sense?
Yeah, that's perfect. So then the yard would be able to go and then get a temperature scanner, or
yes. So that's the perfect example,
or whatever it is. And as soon as that was then in place, then they would be, then that risk assessment would then change, and you would be able to.
No. So that the risk assessment would it basically be a full-on document that we start off saying this is what you had, this is what you need.
Okay.
Sign it off.
You'd just be able to tick yes, got it, tick yes, got that, yes, done this.
Yes. So it will be signed, like I said, it'll be signed off by myself as the person who conducted the risk assessment, and then signed off by the owner, the manager, the health and safety officer, whoever the person is who's going to be the COVID compliance officer. They will sign it off as well. And they need to ensure that then the risks that they haven't foreseen and haven't taken measures to mitigate those effects, that those are then implemented in the workplace.
Okay. So it's fairly simple. It's not a pass or fail. You can't, it's not a case of, okay, you failed it, you will never be able to open your yard again.
No,
okay,
not at all.
Fine. I think people.
And then it's also in the hands of you. So, should one of your employees actually get sick, and let's say the Department of Labor does come and do an inspection at your yard, you then say, well, these are the measures that we had in place. This is what we needed, and we complied with all of these. And we have this protocol in place to deal with someone who did have symptoms of COVID.
Okay. And would that affect your insurance or your insurance payouts? Like what would that, could it affect? Could it? Is it possible?
That is something that is not part of my field. I do not want to give any kind of answers on that. I honestly,
that's fine.
I'm not sure about that.
Okay, no, that's 100%. Maybe that's the next chat we do is what
I
about
think so. Yeah, that'd be a great idea.
And covering yourself. That might be an idea. Let me see if I can find someone who has some information about that. Okay, so how long does it take how long does this process take? What is the thing there?
For me to conduct a risk assessment?
Yeah, so for example, I phone you, I say, hi, Kerri, I have a yard with 3 horses in Eastern Cape somewhere, or in Kimberley. What do we do? What's the process? What happens?
Pop me an email stating I would like you to do the risk assessment for me. I will then follow up with an email explaining what information I would need in order to conduct the risk assessment, and it would take basically 2 working days. So with the yards in Johannesburg or in Gauteng itself, I have offered to travel to the yard and do a face-to-face meeting and sit and gather all the information like that. However, if you're not in Gauteng, or if you just wish to not have a face-to-face meeting, I can gather it over email or over the phone, and within 2 working days you will have your completed risk assessment.
Okay, so that's great. That's fantastic. And you need to have that for any kind of people coming in to do any kind of inspection, any kind of labor inspection, anything like that. Okay.
Yes.
So that's great. All right. Kerri, you've actually covered everything. I've got no questions. That's great. Guys, if anyone's got questions, just pop their hand up or drop me a message or something like that. I'm not seeing anything in chat. Yeah, I think it looks like you've covered it all, girl. You're a star. Guys, I hope that's been helpful for you. If there are any questions, you're welcome to message us later, and I'll put it through to Kerri. I'll also put Kerri's details on the post where I post the recording, just so we have something to refer back to. So Kerri, thank you very much for your time.
Any pleasure. Thank you so much for having me. It was really
anytime. Hopefully we'll get back to shows and I can meet your horse. That would be great. And yeah, guys, if you've got questions, cross fingers, yeah. Soon, we hope. Yeah, guys, if you've got questions, it's a pleasure, guys.
Thank you.
Yeah, pop me questions if you need, drop it in email. And I think we can all go back to making banana bread and carrot muffins. Okay.
But yeah, very happy with that. As you said, Meryl, you will put my contact details up with my email address and my phone number on the website when you post this recording. Please may I ask that no phone calls happen after working hours. You're welcome to WhatsApp me after working hours and I will happily respond as and when. Or send me an email, and I'm generally on my phone quite often, so I'm happy to respond to you and get back to you as soon as possible. But from the time we speak about your risk assessment to the time of receiving your risk assessment, 2 working days.
Yeah, that's perfect. That's absolutely great. Yeah, I think we're going to end this meeting and we can get back to supper. Kerri, if I could ask you to stick around 5 minutes just to chat, we can take things from there.
100%.
And yeah, I will drop everyone an email if I find someone interesting to talk about insurance. And if anybody wants any information about, if anyone wants any other topics covered, please let me know. Ooh, one more thing. While we are busy doing shameless punts, we have a neighbors quiz coming up, guys. If you want a little bit less serious and a lot more fun, come and join us for the neighbors quiz. I am desperately trying to find the dates.
It was sometime in June. I did actually see it pop up.
June 29th. It is if you basically know your pommel from your cancel, you're going to do reasonably well in the. If you know your saddle from your bottle, you're going to do reasonably well in the quiz. It's centered a lot more around fun and a lot less around too serious. We have a couple of yards challenging each other in the quiz, so yeah, you can go ahead and book. It's completely free, although awesome. The donations are welcome. So bring friends, come and join the quiz, and yeah, we will see you guys then, if not sooner. Have a good evening.
Thanks, everyone.
Okay. Bye.